you very much, Mr. President, for the opportunity this evening, to join this debate. And I want to say that I am once again standing here with a sense of pride and a sense of honor to participate on behalf of the government in this debate. Mr. President, I begin by unreservedly stating my full endorsement of the fiscal package presented by the Minister of Finance, the Honourable Minister of Finance, on September 30th, a well-thought-out, well-crafted and disciplined fiscal plan in very trying circumstances. I am proud to be associated with this budget. Today, Mr. President, I am pleased to report on some of the progress that the Office of the Attorney General and the Ministry of Legal Affairs has made over the last year. We have worked to upgrade our legislative framework, introduce reforms through amendments and standalone legislation, and to address inefficiencies within our justice system over the past year. Our achievements are part of our ongoing efforts to continuously improve the outputs of the ministry and reflect our commitment to justice, ease of doing business, transparency, fairness, and good governance in Trinidad and Tobago. May I say immediately, Mr. President, that as I give this account and comment this evening on the work and accomplishment of the departments, units, and institutions under the remit of the Office of Attorney General and Ministry of Legal Affairs, I can only skim the surface. And I wish to advise the listening public that they must appreciate that none of what I report on today can have been accomplished without the dedication and very hard work of every individual who, together, make up the AGLA family, as I always refer to them on our chat group. AGLA being Attorney General and Legal Affairs. Mr. President, the criminal justice system is an area that I will spend a little time on. In addressing the issue of crime, it is an important area for us to look at in the work that has been done by the Office of the Attorney General, Ministry of Legal Affairs. It remains a central focus shaping the legislative, strategic, and operational priorities of my ministry and this government at every level. Reflecting on the progress which we've achieved, and while there is still much left to do, there is much to commend, Mr. President. The legal landscape of Trinidad and Tobago has undergone significant and thoughtful reform. I am pleased to report that over the past year, we have seen several key developments that are positioning our criminal justice system for enhancement and resilience. The work of the Office of Attorney General has been one of balance, modernizing where needed, while preserving the foundational principles guiding our rule of law. The amendments and legislative initiatives introduced this year are the product of careful deliberation and strategy. They are not just responses to immediate challenges, but concrete steps towards a strengthened justice system that is more effective and more accessible to every citizen. Mr. President, let me say that you will have heard me say, and members of the public will have heard me say, a number of things from the abolition of preliminary inquiries through the amended Administration of Justice Indictable Proceedings Act, the vital work of enhancing public safety through the Bail Amendment Act and firearms legislation, and I will focus on some of those this evening. I am proud to say, Mr. President, that in the discharge of my constitutional function as Attorney General, I said it in the other place when I was at Stand-in Finance, I am humbled to play the role of what is referred to as the constitutional conduit between the judiciary, one arm of the state, and the executive, another arm of the state, in the governance that we are all committed to in helping this country to move forward and develop. And I say that quite deliberately, and I have said it differently on other occasions, because it is important for the public to understand, as the different arms of the state work together to advance the society, that there has to be a committee of relations to keep open the lines of communication between the Honourable Chief Justice as administrative head of the judiciary, on the one hand, with his administrative team, and the executive and its agencies and departments, to ensure that the resources and government support are provided for judicial operations and court improvement initiatives. And that brings me to the subject of the abolition of preliminary inquiries, Mr. President. With the 12th of December 2023 proclamation of the amended Administration of Justice Indictable of Proceedings Act 2011, so bear in mind, 2011 Act, proclaimed on the 12th of December 2023, and the simultaneous commencement of the Criminal Procedure Rules 2023, a decade-long consultative process has now birthed a significant legislative accomplishment. We have promised decisive action, and that is exactly what has been achieved. Prior to the implementation of a JIPA, Mr. President, stakeholder engagement was undertaken to ensure readiness. In December 2023, the Judiciary of Trinidad and Tobago, in collaboration with the Office of the Attorney General, Ministry of Legal Affairs, embarked on a sensitization program for stakeholders in the criminal justice system on a JIPA and the systems and processes contained therein. And the simultaneous commencement of a JIPA and the criminal procedure rules has, among other things, empowered the judiciary to take charge of the speed of trials by establishing and insisting on adherence to strict timelines, ensuring an expedited criminal trial process, among other things. This accomplishment has played a pivotal role, Mr. President, in addressing long-standing delays in the criminal justice system. And that JIPA, coupled with the Criminal Procedure Rules 2023, represents a bold and necessary step in modernizing how we handle serious criminal matters. This is tangible progress in the fight against crime and the efficient, expeditious, and humane delivery of justice. I stress humane, particularly because by the application of Rule 1.5, among others, of the Criminal Procedure Rules, all criminal courts are now given comprehensive powers to ensure that children who come before them have their matters appropriately addressed before the children court, as opposed to ordinary magistrates court and masters court. And that court is itself a phenomenal and caring, unique institution like no other court. I had the privilege to visit it and spend a couple of days there when I took office, and it is truly a unique institution in this country. And I stress that as I listened, because I listened to Senator Timal when he spoke caringly and feelingly about the crisis that we have in our society with the breakdown of the family unit, the family structure. And I emphasize the point in answer to Senator Timal that one of the things that we have to ensure that we do as we build our institutions is that we build them to be sensitive to and to help restore the fabric of our society. And one of the things that has taken place with a JIPA and the criminal procedure rules, coupled with the pre-existing children's court, is to emphasize the importance of healing and providing care for our young children who are going astray. Mr. President, a JIPA replaces that previous criminal justice system of preliminary inquiries, which sometimes took as long as 10 years to complete. And we remind ourselves that this was the process before the actual trial, the indictment, could even begin, which itself, the trial, could take another 3 years. A JIPA introduces new procedures for handling indictable offenses, establishing a framework for sufficiency hearings instead of preliminary inquiries to proceed to trial. The system empowers the Master of the High Court to review evidence, witness statements, and exhibits before a case reaches trial to ensure that the cases with merit can move forward. And we've already begun to witness the benefit of that. There was a recent case, the State against Sheldon Dudnorth, published by the judiciary on May the 1st, 2024, in a rare media release which the judiciary put out to alert the public to the significant progress that had begun to take place under a JIPA. This was a matter in which the case was filed on the 11th of January 2024. The offense, remembering that a JIPA came in December 2023, the offenses charged included kidnapping and larceny of a motor vehicle. The sufficiency hearing was concluded on April 16th, 2024. So within a space of 4 months, What would have been a preliminary inquiry that could have taken 6 to 10 years was completed. And the case was determined within the space of that year. So that is part of the significant improvements that have been made under AJIPA. And we had, when the Chief Justice spoke at the opening of term, we had the material which was given to us. So we were able to see that under AJIPA between January the 1st and June 30th, 2024, 20 persons were discharged before a master, 43 persons were able to enter guilty pleas. That is the process by which AJIPA has already begun to impact and expedite the criminal justice system. And we had that one case which, as I said, went from beginning to end in a matter of months within one calendar year. So that is part of the progress that we have to recognize that we are experiencing. And as we enter the new fiscal year, we will continue, the government will continue to support the judiciary with AJIPA and the necessary resources. Importantly, because speed must not come at the expense of procedural fairness. The procedural fairness enshrined in AJIPA affords both the prosecution and the defense the opportunity to present their cases before a master makes any decision. The Act defines the roles and responsibilities of all legal actors, thereby providing greater clarity and accountability in the criminal justice system. Mr. President, my office has ensured that stakeholders are continuously engaged to obtain their feedback on how AJIPA is operating. This continuous dialogue has already led to further amendments, which we have brought to this August chamber. So we brought the Administration of Justice Indictable Proceedings Amendment Act 2024, which provided greater clarity on who qualifies as a police officer under the Act. And later in this very year, we amended Section 33 of the Preliminary Inquiries Act to ensure that that Act continues to apply to extradition matters. So we are continuing, as we say, to improve our legislation. Mr. President, bail is another very important area in which my office has been working very hard in coordinated legislative amendments. And as I talk about legislative amendments, Mr. President, let me make it very clear that the work that we are doing on bringing legislation to this Parliament could not take place without the very committed hard work of some of the departments of the Office of the Attorney General. We have the Law Reform Commission, which researches the policy that informs the law. We have the Chief Parliamentary Counsel, who drafts the law. We have our Criminal Justice Unit, who function as a Legislative Review Committee Secretariat and bring a lot of the material to the fore. So that work could not take place but for the very hard-working units within the ministry. And the Bail Amendment Act 2024, Mr. President, in 2024, we passed an act in this Parliament that bail can be granted to a person charged with murder in exceptional circumstances. And a key component of that amendment is the shift in the burden for bail in serious offenses. So individuals charged with such crimes must demonstrate exceptional circumstances to justify their release on bail. And the Act has imposed bail restrictions on persons charged with specified offenses or where a firearm or prohibited weapon or imitation firearm was used or found to be in the possession of the accused or any other person involved in the commission of the offense. And the High Court will continue to hear applications for murder under AJIPA. Those applications are now speeded up and allowances are made for the accused or the prosecution to appeal decisions of the High Court to either grant or refuse bail in certain circumstances to the Court of Appeal. Mr. President, consistent with the commitment to maintaining a responsive and very relevant legal framework, the Bail Amendment Act 2024 also introduces a mandatory 5-year review of the Bail Act. So we are keeping the legislation under review to ensure that we keep up with the reality as the society is evolving. And these measures embody a balanced thoughtfulness which has been characteristic of this administration's approach, safeguarding individual rights while protecting the society from those who would exploit a lenient bail system. We are sending a strong and unequivocal message. While we uphold the rights of every citizen, we will not allow our justice system to be undermined by a relatively small number of individuals who pose a threat to the interests and security of our people. Mr. President, continuing on the topic of bail, but from a slightly different perspective, I'm also pleased to report that the Law Reform Commission has brought recommendations to me, which I have under consideration for further potential amendments to the Bail Act, consistent with our anti-money laundering and counter-financing and terrorism laws, and our unwavering commitment to combating money laundering in Trinidad and Tobago. Among these recommendations is a provision that could grant the court, of course we have to take it to the cabinet and bring it to the parliament, but it could grant the court power to order an investigation into the source of funds or real property used to secure bail, so that the source of funds of the persons who are offering the bail will come under scrutiny. These recommendations are currently under consideration and will undergo stakeholder consultations before I take them to cabinet. Yes.
Mr. President, in accordance with Standing Order 14.5, I beg to move that the Senate continue to sit until 9:30 p.m. Thank you.
Honourable Senators, the question is that the Senate continue to sit until 9:30 p.m. Those in favour say aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. The business of the Senate will continue until 9:30 p.m. Attorney General.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Mr. President, I was about to move to the subject of firearms, the menace of illegal firearms and weapons which continue to threaten our society. We have been working on this as well in the Office of the Attorney General and the Ministry of Legal Affairs, Mr. President. And this chamber will recall the Firearms Amendment Act number 18 of 2019, which had introduced the offence of firearm trafficking and implemented a tiered system of penalties for first, second, and third-time offences and significantly increased the fines and the penalties. We have moved beyond that, and with the passage of the Firearms Amendment Act, also known as Act number 2 of 2023, this has represented a significant step by this government towards addressing critical policy objectives in the area of public safety and security. Key provisions of this legislation, which we have put into the law in the work that we've done last year, include permitting prison officers to carry firearms while off duty, subject, of course, to the discretion of the Commissioner of Prisons, permitting officers of the Municipal Police Service to have in their possession certain non-lethal devices such as tasers to assist these officers in discharging their duties and responsibilities in a more effective and safe manner, and the introduction of the Firearm User Identification Card, a significant innovation equipped with advanced security features designed to ensure that firearms are meticulously tracked and their users clearly identified. So we have continued that work on the amendments, Mr. President, and additional to the amendments just mentioned, in its policy and legislative capacity, my office continues a very comprehensive review of the entire Firearms Act. Only recently, this country was advised by the Honourable Prime Minister in his budget remarks in this debate on this very budget in the other place that the government was considering further amendments to the Firearms Act to ban automatic weapons and long-range rifles. I am pleased to advise this august chamber, Mr. President, that in consultation with the Ministry of National Security, with input from the Office of the Commissioner of Police, the Law Reform Commission on Friday last, the 18th of October, has presented for my consideration draft amendments to the Firearms Act, and in this regard I shall shortly be taking these to the Legislative Review Subcommittee of the Cabinet and in due course to the Parliament for passage, and that is to say firearms amendments to ban assault weapons and long-range rifles. Mr. President, additionally, there have been a number of legislative review workshops that have been continuing under the auspices of my ministry at strengthening firearms legislation in Trinidad and Tobago. And these have been conducted since April and June of 2022 and continuing to May of this year. These workshops have been funded by the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, and in collaboration with my ministry have facilitated the attendance and participation of a large number of organizations with representatives from the Ministry of National Security, the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, the Public Defender's Department, Trinidad and Tobago Defense Force, Customs and Excise, Tobago Forensic Science Center, Trinidad and Tobago Defense Force, and a number of other national defense agencies and arms. The Office of the Attorney General was represented by officers of the Legislative Drafting Department, the Law Reform Commission, the International Law and Human Rights Office, and the Criminal Justice Unit. Mr. President, this suite of criminal justice and legislation which has been enacted, and the training and the workshops and the stakeholder consultations and international partnerships represent this government's continuing commitment to the advancement of our efforts to strengthen the regulation of firearm control and use across Trinidad and Tobago, ensuring that appropriate measures are in place for both law enforcement and the wider public. In January of 2023, in conjunction with the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, the International Narcotics and Law Enforcement of the United States Department of State, and the Pan American Development Foundation, the Office of the Attorney General conducted a capacity building exercise. This initiative aimed to enhance processes for evidence gathering, strengthening the enforcement of the Anti-Gang Act, and improving the overall effectiveness of our fight against gang-related crime, and to significantly enhance the knowledge and skills of participants from the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service Intelligence Unit, focusing on the effective use, maintenance, and organization of information obtained from informants. Additionally, a further workshop was conducted in April 2024, which focused on examining the evidence and investigative processes required under the Unexplained Wealth Act 2019, particularly concerning cash seizures. I'm pleased to report, Mr. President, that all of this work has recently culminated in the production of a gang investigations handbook, specially tailored for the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, which is serving as a valuable tool in their ongoing fight against gangs. We also have a piece of legislation which the Prime Minister also referred to recently in the budget debate in the other place, Mr. President, and that is the Controlled Operations Bill, which is a piece of legislation that is in draft and we have under consideration, forming part of the government's comprehensive efforts to modernize and strengthen our legal framework. That bill will be a significant step forward in addressing the challenges faced by law enforcement authorities when it comes to gathering evidence in complex investigations, particularly those involving criminal organizations and transnational offenses. The significance of that bill is that it goes beyond the present Firearms Act, which provides that evidence obtained through controlled delivery is admissible in court, but is confined to firearms-related offenses. In today's world, where criminal networks are becoming more sophisticated and operate across borders, the Controlled Operations Bill will provide law enforcement with the tools necessary beyond just firearms-related offenses, related to serious offenses, necessary to investigate and dismantle those operations. And I mentioned those two pieces of proposed legislation, Mr. President, the Firearms Amendment Bill with respect to assault weapons, and now the Controlled Operations Bill, from the perspective of confirming to the opposition that as soon as these bills are ready for discussion, I will be taking it to them, to invite them to join with us in the fight against crime when we bring these bills to the Parliament. I will be taking it to them before I take it to the Parliament to invite their agreement on the provisions. Mr. President, I move to Anti-Terrorism and the National Anti-Money Laundering and Countering of Financing of Terrorism Committee, NAMLAT. As we strengthen our legal work, our legal framework for international cooperation, our efforts are equally focused on ensuring the integrity and resilience of our financial systems. And that is very important in the context of the very strong fiscal plan that the Honourable Minister of Finance has laid out in his budget remarks on this fiscal plan. Mr. President, over the past year, Trinidad and Tobago has made remarkable strides in enhancing its financial governance, with significant progress towards compliance with international standards. This is particularly evident in the work achieved in relation to the Financial Action Task Force and the Global Forum on Transparency and exchange of information for tax purposes. These advancements reflect this government's unwavering dedication in upholding a transparent, secure, and rigorous financial system essential to our economic stability and continued growth. The role of the FATF, Financial Action Task Force, as the global standard setting for combating money laundering, terrorist financing, and proliferation financing is critical to ensuring a secure and viable international financial system. And in the Caribbean, we have the Caribbean Financial Action Task Force. And work has been done very effectively to remove Trinidad and Tobago from the grey list in 2020, and we are now going into our 5th mutual round evaluation with a view to moving Trinidad and Tobago forward even further. The introduction of significant pieces of AML, anti-money laundering, and CFT legislation represents a cornerstone of our efforts in the financial sector, introducing much more strict compliance obligations for financial institutions and designated non-financial businesses and professionals. These entities are now required to adopt far more stringent AML and CFT protocols, contributing to a stronger, more resilient system capable of detecting and preventing financial crime. At the same time, Mr. President, considerable investments were made to boost the capacity of the Financial Intelligence Unit of Trinidad and Tobago and other key agencies, ensuring they are better equipped to enforce these regulations and monitor compliance across the financial sector. Mr. President, the improvement of the diligent oversight at the Registrar General's Department in ensuring compliance with all relevant laws concerning financial transparency, whether under FATF, the Financial Action Task Force, the Caribbean Financial Action Task Force, or the Global Forum, or other various tax information exchange agreements, has been instrumental in our progress, so that the steadfast commitment of Trinidad and Tobago has allowed Trinidad and Tobago to successfully extricate itself from blacklisting by FATF and CFATF, and additionally, thanks to the tireless efforts of the Honourable Minister of Finance in tandem with his high-level committee, we are well on our way to satisfying the requirements of the Global Forum framework. These achievements have sent a strong message, Mr. President, to the international community, reinforcing our standing as a compliant and stable financial institution. The implications for our economy as we discuss this budget are profound. Investor confidence, adversely affected by our former grey listing, has been notably restored. Foreign direct investment is on the rise, buoyed by the perception that Trinidad and Tobago now offers a safer and more reliable environment for international business. FATF compliance is an ongoing process. The government is fully aware of the need to sustain the momentum of reform. Continued adherence to FATF's evolving standards will require further investment in our regulatory frameworks and enforcement mechanisms. Specifically, Mr. President, there is growing recognition of the need to address emerging threats such as those posed by virtual assets and the ever-evolving landscape of financial technologies. Our legal framework must remain adaptable, and amendments to existing laws may be necessary to stay ahead of these developments. The government is already working on initiatives to strengthen oversight in these areas, ensuring our compliance with the FATF standards. Through my ministry, Mr. President, this government has been working assiduously in training sessions for our FATF assessor trainers as we work towards our 5th round mutual evaluation. We have already participated and continue to contribute in the CFATF plenary and working group meetings. In fact, Trinidad and Tobago will be the first CFATF member country to enter the 5th round mutual evaluation process and will present the mutual evaluation report no later than December 31st, 2026. And there is ongoing work at every stage along the way. This process will be rigorous, much more results-oriented, focusing on specific actions to tackle money laundering, terrorist financing, and the financing of weapons of mass destruction. The shorter cycle, the greater scrutiny, and the strong follow-up mechanisms will ensure that governments stay focused on taking effective action to detect, prevent, and punish money laundering, terrorist financing, and the financing of proliferation. And we have participated in a number of meetings already: February 2024, June 2024, one in May 2024, and an upcoming meeting in December 2024, all of the Caribbean Financial Action Task Force body. Mr. President, along with the efforts on FATF, Trinidad and Tobago has made equally significant strides in aligning with the Global Forum on Transparency and Exchange of Information for Tax Purposes. The Global Forum plays a pivotal role in promoting transparency, combating tax evasion through the exchange of financial information between jurisdictions. Our commitment to these principles was enshrined in law with the recent passage of the Miscellaneous Provisions Global Forum Bill 2024. This legislation marks a major advancement in our drive to meet international standards for tax transparency. Mr. President, the framework that we are building is a cornerstone of global efforts to ensure tax authorities have access to the necessary data to detect and combat illicit financial activities. And for Trinidad and Tobago, this is a pivotal moment in modernizing our tax administration. And I will mention a little later on the Teresa, the tax matter that we recently won in the Privy Council, which is an important part of our building out our revenue authority. So by implementing the protocols, we have significantly enhanced the capacity of our tax authorities to prevent evasion and ensure compliance with international tax obligations. Mr. President, recovering criminal assets remains a critical element of Trinidad and Tobago's strategy to combat money laundering, terrorist financing, and proliferation financing. By successfully confiscating and forfeiting assets linked to criminal activities, we not only disrupt the profit motive behind crime, but also deter future criminality. Our commitment to FATF compliance is demonstrated by the implementation in this jurisdiction of the Civil Asset Recovery and Management and Unexplained Wealth Act. And in a landmark ruling on the 31st of January 2023, the Court of Appeal upheld the constitutionality of this act and reinstated preliminary unexplained wealth orders against 3 nationals of Trinidad and Tobago, remitting their cases for further hearing. This ruling is a significant step in ensuring that those who profit from criminal activity are not only convicted, but are stripped of their ill-gotten assets. It's a remarkable piece of legislation that allows, on the basis of reasonable suspicion, allows law enforcement to seize assets and to require on a shifted onus of proof the person in whose name those assets belong to prove that they have the means by which they have come to afford that asset. So the onus of proof is shifted to allow them to demonstrate that these are not ill-gotten gains. Mr. President, we continue to work continuously in the FATF and Global Forum areas, and I would mention in our commercial viability, the Arbitration Act, which we passed in 2023. Only last week I was to speak on it, and because I was involved in the stand-in finance, I was privileged to ask my good Senator Renuka Sagram Singh Suklal to stand in and make remarks at the very important arbitration conference, which took place right here in Trinidad and Tobago. And we remind ourselves, when I spoke here last on that bill, that that piece of legislation, which came into effect in 2023, replaced a 1923 piece of legislation and has breathed life into our commercial climate and our capacity to attract foreign-based entities. Mr. President, as we continue to develop, I've already mentioned the Registrar General's Department, and apart from the contributions to Financial Action, Task Force, and Global Forum work, that Registrar General's Department has long been a cornerstone of our nation's administrative and legal framework. It is responsible for some of the most essential functions in the public service, including the registration of births, marriages, deaths, and deeds, as well as the administration of land titles. And I will say that the incident which has been causing some concern in Tobago with the Registrar General's Department was resolved by a very clear cabinet minute that has transferred the functions of the CAST to the Registrar General, with responsibility to look after the affairs of the Registrar General's Department for all of Tobago. And I am optimistic that that is going to make a significant difference. Over the last few years, Mr. President, the Registrar General's Department has embarked on a journey of digital transformation, and we will have heard from the Honourable Minister of Digital Transformation already, and I thank him for the work that he has done in assisting this in the whole of government approach that we as a government have towards evolving all of our ministries.
Attorney General, you have 5 more minutes.
Thank you to contribute. So we've spoken there of the work of the registry, the Registrar General Department. There is a central authority, Mr. President, which deals with extradition matters, and they are also a key member of the National Anti-Money Laundering Committee, working to align our standards with global framework for financial action task force. And very recently, only last week, Friday, with the work of members of the CPC's department and the Central Authority, I was able to commit Trinidad and Tobago to putting forward the CARICOM arrest warrant as a model bill to the heads of government, and we will shortly be bringing local legislation in Trinidad to make, as our domestic law, a CARICOM arrest warrant domestic piece of legislation. Mr. President, I turn to record my appreciation to the leadership of 2 persons in particular in a recent development about which I am quite proud. And I'm speaking here of the passage of the Miscellaneous Provisions Judicial and Legal Service Act 2024, and I want to acknowledge the very hard work of Ms. Rachel Turab, immediate past Acting Solicitor General, and Mr. Sean Julian, Chief State Solicitor, now Chief State Attorney, under the new law that is introducing a sea change in the Civil Law Department that is going to enhance the efficiency of the service to Trinidad and Tobago of significantly improved legal services. That's also bringing the children's attorneys under the rubric of the Civil Law Department, and has also introduced significant amendments to the Patents Act to give contract officers the authority to do much more expanded expert work for the international, for the IPO, sorry, I lost my trend of thought there, the IPO office. So we are Intellectual Property Office, Mr. President. So we are looking forward to the sea change that has been introduced by that particular piece of legislation. And as I come to a close, Mr. President, I want to spend just a little bit of time on acknowledging a very significant endeavor that the Office of the Attorney General and the Ministry of Legal Affairs participated in last month, September. And that is a national consultation on domestic violence in our society. This government recognizes the ills of domestic violence in our society. We seek to build consultative mechanisms within government, international and regional agencies, academia, non-governmental organizations. I was very impressed in that consultation, which took place on the 25th of September 2024, at the considerable body of work that is being done by the Honourable Minister Ayanna Webster-Roy in the Office of the Prime Minister on that particular area of domestic violence and giving support to persons who are in need of greater protection and who can rely on the resources of the government, particularly through the Office of the Prime Minister under Minister Ayanna Webster-Roy. And Mr. President, the crime symposium is something that I will mention briefly. We know that we had a very important public health issue crime symposium in Trinidad and Tobago in October 23. There has been a significant development on that crime symposium. Since then, there have been developments on that in Guyana, Barbados, and Belize, and there is actually a follow-up crime symposium taking the cue from our lead in October 2023, a further crime symposium that is going to be hosted in Guyana next month, November, by Barbados in Guyana, because Barbados is taking that second crime symposium following on our lead in October last year to Guyana to coincide with the visit of Prime Minister Modi to Guyana in November. So it is going to be quite an interesting conversation that is going to take place in the context of something that Trinidad and Tobago led on, that is to say, crime as a public health issue. Mr. President, that brings me to the close. As I said at the beginning, I could not do justice to the work that this ministry has been doing over the last year in the 40 minutes allocated to me, but I want to go on record to thank Honourable Minister Sagram Singh Suklal, Minister in the Office of the Attorney General, and all of the other very significant, and it is invidious to call names, so I will not, but I do want to acknowledge Minister Sagram Singh Suklal. But I thank every member of the Office of the Attorney General for the very hard work, and I am proud to be associated with. Thank you very much.